Today on the Deep Life podcast, we welcome Nikki Starcat Shields. Nikki, welcome to the Deep Life.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And we're so excited. Nikki, you are an author, a book midwife, aka writing coach, which I love that analogy and I can't wait to get into. And you lead transformational writing retreats. You currently have 6 nonfiction books published with others in the works. And you're a longtime pagan priestess, which you say spirituality is the key to helping you unlock this side of the work that you do. And I full-heartedly believe that. So let's kind of dive into that as a foundation, and let's give the audience a little bit of framework, like how you began to cultivate and resonate and maybe birth out that creativity within you.
All right. Well, so I was born as someone who loved words, books. Like I was reading at a young age. I wanted to be a writer. When you're a little kid and anyone asked me what do you want to be when you grow up? A writer. Hello, obviously, right? So I was doing that for a long time, and then I kind of got told, like we all do, by the culture that you can't make a living as a writer. That's not realistic. You need to choose something else that makes money. Da 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 da. So I went down that road. Was I chose journalism because I thought, well, I can still write. And so I studied that in college, and I quickly kind of found out that the high stress deadline life was not for me. It didn't really resonate with, it made me feel sick and stressed and not well. So I ended up having this whole first career of being in public radio, which I loved. I was behind the scenes, so I wasn't like on deadline, but I was supporting those who were. I loved the people. It was an ethical career to have, but it wasn't my original calling. And I kept getting these like taps on the shoulder by the muses, like, come on, you're supposed to be writing. And so I was always a journaler. So I was journaling, which is writing. Like I tell my writing clients, like journaling is writing. That does count, right? It's, you're learning to write and be creative. But I wanted more. And at the same time, so that's like one thread, is like the creative thread. The spiritual thread of my life was that I was raised in kind of an agnostic family. We weren't in a particular religion. We didn't go to church, that sort of thing. But I became curious about it as I went along. And so in college, I started like looking into things. And I remember this one class I had was on Greek mythology. And I was inspired to write a poem. And it was like really kind of mystical. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And so I started reading, and I discovered that really what I am is a pagan, a nature-based spiritual person, a witch, whatever words you want to give to it. Like there's more these days than back then. I'm 55, so this was a while ago when I was in college discovering this, like, it was. So I started looking into that. And as part of that, I found some others in my state, and I mean, from Maine in the US. And I found some others who were practicing as well. And I started writing a column for a little newsletter, which was like one of those like old-fashioned stapled together and mailed around newsletters here in Maine. And so I would write a column every few weeks for that. And that was my writing, that and journaling. And then when I was in my late 30s, I kept getting that calling to like write a book, write a book, write a book. And someone suggested that I collect these essays that I'd been doing in these newsletters. So that was the first book. My pagan name that I chose, which I now use as my middle name for my author name, is Starcat. And it's kind of in homage to Starhawk, who's a pagan writer who I've really admired. So it's like, and I've always been a cat lover, so the cat piece. So so the book was Starcat's Corner. So essays on pagan living. So it's all about like living in harmony with the earth and the moon cycles and all of that stuff. So and then I discovered, I don't know if you or your followers are you familiar with human design?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I wouldn't know mine, I just know it's a thing. Yes.
So I discovered that I'm a reflector, which it made sense. Like 1%, like anytime I took any of those quizzes, the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or anything like that, I was always, you're in the 1% or 2% of people. I'm like, okay, that's why I'm such a weirdo. But when I got older, I realized like what the gifts are of that. And like one of them is like being really in tune with the moon phases, which I always had been. And then the other thing that really serves me in what I do now is I've kind of created my own second career now. And that is, so I started writing books. I had that first one, and then I started writing some other books. And I had friends coming to me like, oh, can you help me write my book? Like, can you help me get going? And so I started helping them. and realized that I loved it. They loved it. Like I was good at like holding space and encouraging them. And I was bringing all of those like pagan gifts to the table, like doing guided meditations for them or helping them set intentions with the moon, with the writing, and all like combining. That's where the threads kind of wove
Mhm.
together a lot. And I created this book midwife. It was a friend who I helped who suggested you could be a book midwife, like that could be your thing. And I'm like, okay. So that was 2018 when I officially like created that. And since transitioned to now I'm full-time doing writing coaching and running retreats, which is another like the retreats is like holding a sacred container for
Mm.
transformation and creativity. Again, like gifts of a reflector, like that's one of the things that we're meant to do is hold community space. So it all kind of came together. And I love how our spirituality, it doesn't matter what it is, like you don't have to be a witch or a pagan or a certain thing, but whatever your connection is to something deeper than yourself, than your like waking self,
Mm.
often connects deeply with your creative impulse and the
Mm.
ability to create.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Did that come naturally to you in your writing process and sort of weaving of your spirituality into it and then later coaching, or did you have to like figure it out?
It came naturally. So one of the questions that you guys wanted me to like bring forth some questions like, what's the one thing that you can do
Yeah,
to
Mhm. Yeah,
yes.
of course.
and so that ties in here. The one thing that I started doing in 1997 when my first child was like really little is I started a daily spiritual practice. And
Mm.
I've kept it going since then. So for more than 25 years, I've been doing this. And it hasn't been the same thing every day, but it's always like setting aside time to do something that connects me with like something beyond just my, waking self. And so that, I think that really enabled me to, because part of what I do is like journaling, like I'll
Mhm.
draw a tarot card, I'll journal, so part of that really helped me to make that connection with, oh, when I'm really tuned in and I'm centered, then the creativity flows better. So that's really the thing that I would tell anyone. And so up until then, so it's probably around 1990. So probably for like 7 years, I'd been studying and reading, and all the books always say like start a daily spiritual practice. And no, I'm too busy, or no, I can't be that consistent. Whatever. When I finally did that and really like committed to it and realized that it didn't have to be the same thing every day because that could get boring. But it's just some time set aside for me in the morning to connect and do whatever my practice is. That was like key. And that's what I tell anyone who wants to like start doing this stuff is like just pick one. It could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be journaling, it could be, tarot cards, anything that appeals to you. And start there and just really do it. You're building you're building a connection with your deepest self, really. And that's where our
Yeah.
creativity, our creative wellspring comes from.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I love that you brought this up. Let's dive deeper into that as something that we can cultivate all on individual levels because, yes, we have different schedules, there's different home needs. Like, I tell Dan all the time, be set routine, but try to be as, malleable and go with the flow as we can. But for 1,000%, like, could not agree that, our spiritual or wellness practice is one of the things that we've been cultivating probably for over a decade. And journaling is part of that. Like the first thing that we do in the morning is we get up, we'll meditate between 15 and 20 minutes, we'll make a pot of coffee, and then we sit down and journal. And we have our own stations, and it's like beautiful, it's quiet, it's still dark. The world is like very just docile, and here we are. And I know that obviously we're newer friends because we're just meeting here, but a little bit of a background, like I hated to write. I really just began journaling maybe 4 years ago because I felt that within me I had a block that was really tied to schooling. And I called myself not smart a lot of the time. I didn't want to write, I didn't want to read, I didn't want to do anything that kind of tied me to that traumatic childhood that I had of being not smart and not getting good grades and not like spelling perfectly, not having the perfect grammar and everything. So it felt like my inner child was almost blocking some of the creative gifts that I had. And then I pulled back and, I didn't start journaling right away, but I started doing other things like cold plunges, saunas, like meditating constantly, grounding and earthing, like becoming just like more in tune with my inner state, like meditating. Then I felt like all of the walls started to break down. And finally, one day I was like, okay, wait a minute. Here I am. I'm like kind of ready to journal. I don't really know what I'm going to journal about, like maybe some gratitude stuff. And then I feel like it just opened the door. So the reason why I kind of went on that tangent is, do you find that with people like have these creative blocks, and like are there synonymous ones or similar ones that people adapt? And like, is schooling, like traumatic schooling, or being said like you're not smart, or again, that was a narrative I made up, but is that something that could potentially block the creativity?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is super common because what we're trying to do, this is another of my favorite writing tips ever, is you're familiar with like the left brain and right brain. So your left brain is kind of the analytical, you know, talking self sort of thing. And the right brain is very creative and free. And like the inner, I love that you mentioned inner child, like that's something we play with in my work.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we try to do when we sit down to write is we were trained in school to write and edit at the same time, like make it perfect because you're going to be graded, right? Like, and so that blocks the flow of the creative, like part that likes it to just be flowy. And because we're trying to like, no, we have to spell it right, we have to have a complete sentence and blah blah blah. And when you try to, it's like pushing the accelerator and the brake at the same time. Like
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
really go anywhere. And so the first thing I do when I work with people is to get them to commit to having sessions where they really just set aside that editor piece, like it's a hat, take off the editor hat, and let the other stuff come through.
Yeah.
One of the techniques that we use a lot comes from, I mentioned the author Starhawk earlier. This comes from Starhawk's book, The Spiral Dance. Like the seed of it does. She had something she called the triple self, and so it's sort of along the lines of the ego, the superego, but it's her own magical take on it. And I've taken that and kind of used it and expanded it as a tool. But the basics of it are that we have three parts of ourselves. We have talking self, which is like the waking consciousness brain, left brain kind of da da da. You should do this, and this is on your list, and blah blah blah. We have younger self, which is like our inner child, like you mentioned, and that part of us is the part that actually loves anything to do with the senses. This is why you were describing your ritual. It's very quiet and beautiful. And we have these stations, there's probably candles and crystals or whatever, you know, like this, you have your beautiful artwork behind you. Like this is the part of us that loves anything to do with pleasing the senses.
Yeah.
And then we have deep self, which is like our deep inner wisdom. It's like your gut, intuition, like your knowledge in your gut. And this part of us is connected and plugged into all that is. And that's where that creative wellspring comes from. But talking self and deep self do not speak the same language. They can't communicate. But younger self can be that translator, especially when you please her or him with like the beautiful ritual, with the lovely music or the bird song or quiet, whatever it is, burning the incense, all of the things that ritual brings us. If you just like please that part of you and you get aligned, then you're able to kind of drop down and be like, oh, I don't need to worry about sentence structure or all this stuff. Even if you're writing a book, you don't need to worry about that in the draft. Like that's later. That's later, like all of that can be done later. You really just need to get into that alignment and let the words kind of flow, because the writing we did in school, so school is a huge like block for people, whether you did really well in school or really poorly or anywhere between, because you were expected to do things in a certain way. It was very rote. They wanted the right answers. They wanted you to parrot back what you'd heard. And if you think about it, that's not what we want when we as adults go to read a book. We don't want this generic subject matter, like, in order to meditate, please sit quietly. Like that's boring, right? Like you want to read like the books that are like, ooh, here's my story and my, like, and so you want to be your own creative, authentic self and have your own voice. Even if you're talking about a subject like meditation that gets talked about everywhere, it's your lens that people want to know about. They want to hear your story. So if you can set aside that editor piece and just be yourself and write freely, then later on, yeah, you can go back and spell check. You can make sure the sentences are complete and the paragraphs aren't too long or whatever. Talking self loves that stuff. Like they'll be happy doing that later. but not at the same time.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love these three aspects of self that you broke down so beautifully and how they're all interconnected and using the inner child as the kind of gateway or intermediary. Absolutely. Like our listeners definitely will know we're super familiar with, we talk about the ego all the time, the shadow, the inner child, and then that deep inner self of what we call like our highest self or just self with a capital S. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm so glad that you laid it out in that way. Do you have what are your like thoughts and opinions on emotional blocks when it comes to writing? Like if there's, fear or sadness or grief or, these heavy emotions that stick with us that we also, not necessarily in school, but we're just taught at a very young age, not how to feel certain ways. And you so beautifully said, like, we're sentient beings, like the highest aspect of ourself, I believe, came here to like feel. That's why we have the five senses that we adapt and kind of help us navigate through this third dimensional reality that we're living in. But the way that I've kind of understood it recently and like listening to other people and experts and stuff, like our feelings, they're the core of like the depth of who we are as like a soul derived from spirit. But the emotions that we experience really are tied to our egoic self, that false sense of who we are, again, needed to navigate this world because we have things to learn and things to do and purposes and accomplishments. But because those are stuck as like stories within that narrative that the ego creates for us, they get stuck. They're like emotions are energy and emotions, and they need to be, come and go so that we can almost feel them at the depths of our core without attaching to them. But the ego likes the attachment because then it can just hang on to it and it almost like clutters or sticks within our like false self, and then we are left not feeling what's truly meant to be felt. So I'm visualizing as like blockages because I feel like the more in tune I was able to get with like feelings and like allowing myself to cry or scream or like hit a pillow, there was a natural release. And not right away am I writing a book, but like days later I'd be like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm getting a lot of intuitive downloads, or I'm feeling really creative. I visualize so much within like my mind's eye after I feel I clear a lot of emotions. So I'm curious if that resonates.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What we do is we work with resistance, which, so I say to people, like, if you were just, just clear and didn't have any resistance, you would just be over there writing your book. You wouldn't need to come and seek help. So let's figure out what this resistance is.
Yeah.
And so the things that we do with that, we do shadow work. So shadow work is just like looking at what's up. So you say, I want to write a book and I want it to be a bestseller. And you're like, I love that. I'm gung ho, but it hasn't happened. And so there's some part of you that does not want that. And so you look at why is that? This is called your divided will in a lot of magical work. Like you have a divided will, like you want one thing, but part of you doesn't. And usually the reason the shadow doesn't want it is to protect you, because you did get criticized as a child, or you were told you were too much, or you need to like think inside the box and not be so wild, or you need, whatever it was, like those messages. It was meant to like keep you safe and keep you part of the tribe so you don't get kicked out and killed. Like the ego thinks like it's all life and death, right? It's like this fight, flight, freeze, fawn kind of thing. Like, oh, we write a book and people don't like it, we'll die, so
It's kind of comical when you say it like that, but it's so believable in my
real. It's real. It feels real. And so what we do when we do our shadow work is we look at that. We do some journaling prompts usually to kind of identify it, and we talk about it. And once you can see it, it's a shadow, right? So once your light, the attention of your light self is looking at it, that does a lot to kind of help dissipate it. And then there are other things we can do to help integrate it. One of the metaphors that I love that comes from a business coach of mine was, yeah, okay, so the shadows get to say their piece, but they don't get to drive the bus. They don't get to, they're going to sit in the back seat with their crayons and not, control the radio. That, deep self gets to really drive, but you listen to them kindly, like they're children. Like, oh, I hear that you feel like I'm in danger because, there might be a bad review on my book, and then there'd be a hater. And then I feel that, but you know what, we're gonna do this anyway. And what I like to do in more recent years, I've kind of discovered the power of some of the somatic work. I know this is everywhere right now, and I think it's because it's what our collective consciousness needs, is this getting the stuff out of the body.
Yes.
So I just had a good friend of mine who's an EFT certified EFT practitioner, tapping. I had her come in and do like a workshop with my writers around value and self-worth and tapping. Like so many of us, the one thread, there were like, I think 7 of us on the call, and the one thread that everyone had that was in common was that my value is tied to my behavior. And so intellectually we can say, oh, no, we have inherent value as sentient beings, but there's something that says, but I have to be good, or I have to do things the right way, or I have to, or alternatively, screw all that, I have to rebel because that's my, like, no, I'm not doing that thing that you want me to do, like, so
I was thinking of that earlier when you were talking about the blockages from school. I think I have the very similar one where it's more of a like, fuck you, I'm not doing homework.
I'm not doing
And I've always loved writing, and I've always like believed I was a good writer, and I go through phases where I'm really called to write something, but then I'm like, no, I'm not doing homework.
No, it's like, and sometimes your shadow, that shadow can convince you that sitting down to write your book is the homework. So you're like, nope, not doing it. Nope, can't make me, which is, like I said, it's all understandable. But if we can see them, and then also the tapping or something that gets it into your body. I also do yoga, and I find that that's really helpful to get the body like really aligned with consciousness. And then you can release some of that stuff and make it lighter, and it might still be there. You might still have, like, if you wanted to write a book and you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down 3 times a week and I'm going to write my book, there might still be that rebel that's like, I'm not doing that, I want to go outside, no. But then you'll recognize it. You'll have awareness of, oh, that's the shadow that doesn't want me to write the book. Okay, shadow, we're going to go for a walk after our writing session. And in the meantime, we're going to put on a really cool playlist that inspires us, and we're just going to do the thing. And then we'll go for a walk. Like, it's just like communicating with it and bringing it in, integrating it.
Yeah, awareness is so key. I'm glad that we kind of steered the conversation this way. So maybe we can jump into kind of like healing these wounds, especially around values and self-worth and our creativity, especially when it's tied to money. And like you said, of course, we've all been taught this is, don't be a singer or songwriter, don't be an artist of some sorts, whether that be a painter or drawing, or whatever. Because you go out in the real world to get a real job, whatever that means. Again, you have to make that definition and give it meaning yourself. But I'm super curious. Maybe this is the collective consciousness and us all on this ascension journey, but values and worth have been something that I have been diving into probably within the last 6 to 8 months so unbelievably much, because what you exactly said about describing the EFT in your call with the tapping is I equate my value and worthiness with doing things. Like not being, just doing, whether that be like laundry, cleaning, cooking, like taking care of groceries, whatever it may be, it's like doing something.
And it's like, if you get all of those things done, then as a reward, you might get to go do what you actually wanted to do.
Yes.
Like it's like this whole like talking self thing. That's yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's like a wound. And it's like something that I am trying to uncover, through journaling and through meditation, through somatic healing and stuff. And a lot of the times I'm thinking to myself, no one ever told me that I was going to be valuable because I did things. Like I try to understand, again, like through my inner child and all the inner child work that I've done, is I think I just picked it up as an energy because I saw that that's what like my grandmother did. And like she helped raise me because my mother was a single parent for so long. So I watched her, and then I watched all the women in my family and pretty much everybody else have this like do, go. Like you put other people first before yourself.
And the reverse isn't true. You were kind of taught that by role modeling, but we also are, most of us are not taught that we are inherently worthy. We're either taught in some religion that says we're inherently sinful,
yes,
or we're just you have to do all this stuff just to get rid of this sin that really had nothing to do with you in the first place. But that was one of the, so my dad's mother was religious and she was a Baptist, and she wanted me to go to church, go to Sunday school. And so when I was little, they actually went, okay, we'll send you. And then I came home with this like brochure, and I'm like this little 4-year-old girl with this brochure, giving it to my mom of like, why I'm a sinner. And she's like, okay, enough of that. We're not doing that. But even if you're not in those religions, you're still in this culture, which is really based on like hustle and get ahead and do the things, do. And like you said, like devaluing the arts, devaluing anything that isn't really connected to making money. Like in a lot of our culture, it's like, yeah, or putting it, like I said, if you can have that as a reward if you're good and you do all the things first, and how does, then time gets eaten up and it never really happens. So I have a coach named Jody Shield, who is British, and she says to please freely share this. So I'm like not sharing her proprietary stuff. She wants this to be out in the world. She says that self-worth is kind of the surface level of it, but value is what we're really not taught about. And value, the only way the word value is really used in our culture is often with like, oh, this, like, buy this object, it's a good value for the money, whatever. It's very intellectual and very surface, but that deep feeling of valuing ourselves as worthy beings, there's a couple things that we can do to work with that. So one of them she likes to suggest is that we start using, because also we don't use those words value or valuable, start using it in your language, like maybe say to each other, I value you and your presence in my life. Or if someone helps you out with something, I value your time and your energy. You are a valuable being in my life. And even with like our pets, it's often so easy, like with pets, to like really feel like I value this cat because she comes and sits on my lap and purrs and I feel better. Like this value, like putting value on the beingness of beings in our life. So really starting to use it and bring it in. Yeah, bring it in and start to use it. And then the other thing is to just the process of reprogramming ourselves, whether we're using EFT or journaling or some combination, to just continue to be aware, like we do with the shadow selves, like continue to be aware, oh, okay, that's that part of me that thinks that I don't get to sit down and journal until I've done all the laundry. Okay, I see that, and I'm going to do things a different way. Making choices, making those aware choices. When I first started writing my books, I have my own office now, but I was at like the corner of the dining room table in it's like an open concept, so I could see the kitchen and all the dirty dishes and and I had to really struggle with not trying to like clean every dish before I sat down to write. And I just had this whole, like, it became a whole game. It's like, okay, I see you dishes, I'm over here and I'm writing, like just kind of knowing my own pattern of wanting to get all that stuff squared away. Like, if I do that, then it's going to be time for this and and I won't have time. So I'm going to prioritize what I actually want to do, which may or may not. So that's the thing about creative works, is they may actually make you money. You may sell your book eventually and get money. You may sell that piece of artwork and get money, but that's not why you're doing it. And It's not like the immediacy of being hourly wages or a paycheck. It's not as like, yep, I'll get paid on Friday. It's like, no, I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? When I work with people, I say, okay, we're going to set an intention for your book. And there is going to be 2 parts for it. One is the one that everybody thinks about. What do you want this book to do for other people? I want to change the world. I want to entertain. I want to save lives. I want to, the impact. So that is one piece of it. But the other piece is, what is writing this book doing for me? And it's often, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, so a lot of times it's like, well, I want to spread the word and have my audience be bigger, and like, great, okay, what is it doing for you before you even get to that point? And then kind of breaking it down and like, okay, what is it doing for you now, today? And often it's like getting rid of those blockages. It's like freeing up that creative alignment so that I can do, and it ripples outward into other parts of life. It's not just writing the book. I had a client come to me after being in my program for several months saying, you say this is about writing a book, but it's not just writing a book, right? Because she was making better decisions, other parts of her life. She was like being more authentic in relationships, and she, like there was a lot going on. Like, yeah, it's really about the creativity and the spirituality.
So beautiful. Yeah, it's kind of like a spider casting and like weaving its web. Everything becomes like interconnected when you begin to, unravel what's inside. And yeah, I feel like that's awesome.
In your retreat, did you find the EFT to be really helpful with people? Like, what was that process like? If you don't.
Yeah, it was. So in the workshop, we kind of co-created it. I talked about this value stuff like we've been talking about. We did some journaling prompts to kind of hone in on where each, like person got to hone in on where theirs was and what it was around. Then
Mm.
we talked about it. And while everybody was sharing, the EFT practitioner was like taking notes, like, okay, that's where she was like, okay, everybody has a thread that is like this, and let's tap on it. And then when we tap on it, I can only speak to my own personal experience, but really I often feel this like sigh, and this like stress just goes away. It's like,
Mm.
oh, I didn't even know I'd been holding that. Okay, that feels better, Yeah. So yeah, it's like
It's something I've been interested in for a while.
Yeah.
I haven't really explored too deeply.
and there are that's just the somatic like practice that I'm most familiar with, but there's a lot of other different ones too that people can look into.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And I feel like gosh, there's so many directions I want to go, just because as creativity is becoming something that I am much more drawn to recently, as opposed to anything like structured. I mean, I kind of left my corporate job almost like 10 years ago. I worked in an office and stuff, and it was awful. And then I went like into real estate, because I was like, oh, I'll just want to be my own boss and I can like sell houses. And that was fun. At least I was able to have a different schedule, but you work 24/7 with that. It's just not for me.
Takes over your life, right? Like
Yeah. And then Dan is a personal trainer and holistic lifestyle coach and has had his business for a while. So I decided like, all right, I'll do the nutrition coaching, because we've been on this wellness and health journey. But a few years ago, we were uprooted back to our like childhood state of Massachusetts. And I was there, and I had a lot of family stuff go awry. And I felt like I took like a 2-year sabbatical of like doing nothing. I was focusing on my family, but also focusing on me, as I knew it was a big part of a human initiation, if you will. There were a lot of sicknesses and deaths that are revolved around it. But what I realized is the less that I did, the more open myself was to explore these different avenues of creativity. Like there were some days where I would just journal all day long, and it was incredible. There were some days I was crying all day long, but as a release, and that is a somatic release to an extent, because we're not holding it in. And I realized I feel like the floodgates opened, and like I kind of was saying before, there's so much more, like I call them intuitive downloads. Just like kind of one-line sentences that make sense to me, but then I'll say them to Dan and it will kind of make sense to him too. And I'm like, wait, this is pretty profound. And I find myself very drawn to like photography. Like that's something that I so desperately want to pursue as an avenue of, kind of like you were saying, like people want to read the lens that they're writing through. It's like, yes, I want to show my unique lens that I'm able to capture in this, world or reality that I'm living in now. But the reason I'm saying this is I felt for so long that I was being dictated by the egoic self. And like, how can this make money? How can this, like, I was almost like in that fear state of survival, because I was conditioned to understand these things and not understand, like I'm doing these things for money, because money helps me live and pay rent and buy groceries and all of these things. And I'm trying to go so unbelievably like slowly and truly understand what this creative side actually wants from me. Like, what does the aspect of myself who's so interested in photography want to say? Because I don't want it to be like, okay, yes, hurry up, like get a website, get your portfolio, go buy the perfect camera, like start making money immediately. And it's like, but I've done that for 30 plus years. And it's gotten me to this place of like, who am I? What am I doing? I'm like crying every second. I'm like, this can't make sense. So I know that I'm being nudged in this direction, but it's giving like, it's taking everything for me, like you were saying, like not to wash the dishes first, or like researching cameras and like actually how to build a portfolio. I was thinking, oh my gosh, Dan, has Nikki been reading my journal like about like literally, I think yesterday I sat there, I was like, I'm really anxious right now. There's 10 dishes in the sink. Like, do I wash them? Do I not? Like, I know I don't wash them. But it's the awareness. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the big shift, and kind of like I wanted to lean into the awareness part of it. That's why my tangent I'm going on here. Like I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the feelings that are drawing me to this really creative aspect deep within me. And I don't want to be led astray by the shadow and the ego. That's not that they're trying to sabotage. I think they're trying to keep me safe, as you so said. I don't want to be made fun of. I'm really scared to, show my authentic self, because I think I'm still figuring out who I truly am, in a sense. And I hope that process allows me to uncover it, which I think is what you were saying about your student or client, that you're like, wait, this is so much more than just writing a book. I'm hoping it's helping me to discover who I truly am.
Well, and it sounds like you went with, like, you've been doing your spiritual practice for 10 years. So you can come into it from spirituality, and then that allows your creativity to flourish, or you can come into it through creativity, and then that allows your spirituality. So like it's really very entwined. I have one retreat attendee who, most people who come into my world are like drawn to at least a little bit of the woo-woo stuff, because otherwise they'd resonate with somebody else, right? But this particular retreat attendee was like, well, this is all fine and good, but I'm not really, magical. I don't really have that. And then everybody was like, yeah, you do. And then she was sharing about how in her work, which is completely not related to spirituality or whatever, but in her work, she often finds herself like giving advice to people, or people want her to like listen and give creative advice to stuff that's not even really work related. But that's, that's like, oh, you know what, you're creative, obviously, because she's writing this amazing novel, but also you are spiritual in that you have that connection to the inner wisdom, or you can help people find their connection to their inner wisdom. And so you can come at it like either way. And then I just want to say, I totally resonate with that like entrepreneur spirit of, okay, I have a new hobby. How can I monetize it? Let's like gung ho, And sometimes it's like, okay, let's not. Let's explore it and see what gifts it has. Like you said, just having the awareness that that's a thing that you might tend to do goes a long way towards, okay, wait a minute,
Okay, I'm so glad you started that. Yeah, I wanted to bring awareness into it just because I think that once we become aware of certain patterns and programs, or the thought energy that ruminates, that monkey mind that constantly goes on, it's not that it's going to stop it right away, but the awareness is there, and then you're able to catch yourself a whole lot easier. I do find myself looking at the dishes or looking at the laundry, like, okay, is this going to kill me if I don't do it right now? No, exactly not. Like, where am I able to put more creative energy, whether it be actually like doing something like writing, coloring, taking a picture, or if it's not, perhaps it is just sitting and meditating and feeling what's required to feel at that moment. Because typically I'll get very anxious. I'll get really, really anxious if I feel I'm not doing something I'm supposed to be doing. And right then and there, like, I tense up, my heart starts to pound, and I of course, like, I can barely hear myself, let alone allow creativity to, flow through me.
And we're taught that our journey is very linear. Like in this culture, everything's like start to finish. But
Yeah.
really the spiral of spiritual growth, like it's in a spiral shape. And sometimes it trips us up because we'll come back around to the same thing. Like even today, I'll be like, oh my God, this kitchen is a mess. I better deal with it before I go upstairs to my office. Oh, wait, that's that thing. Wait, didn't I solve this already? Like, shouldn't I be over this by now? But no, you're seeing it from a different place on that spiral. And you're like, oh, and then now it becomes much easier and freer to say to my housemate, can you clean up the kitchen? I've got to go do some work, and not feel guilty or, like, oh, I can't ask that of someone, like, no, it's like, you know what? This needs to be done. I need to do something. Let's collaborate, So it just becomes, once you keep working with it, it comes to a new place on it where you're like, okay, all right, this doesn't have to be so difficult.
We use that analogy all the time, the spiral staircase. It's part of our logo. Yes, it absolutely is. It's this vertical ascension, and that really does come from the present moment.
Yeah.
That like flow state, if you said, we can kind of touch upon that, because it took me a while, as we've had a couple episodes that we've taped sololy about like time and how it's an illusion and a construct that we obviously require to learn through and be through, in this third dimension, right? Like we had a time and date of this meeting, like it's essential, but you know, the past and the future, they're linear. But if you think of the now moment as that vertical, the ascension, and then it's all encompassing, it's not either way. And the past is dictated from the present moment of what your memory of it is, and then your future is dictated from that past that you're either trying to recreate or whatever. How important is that, would you say, like to become fully present with maybe who you are, what your vision is in that now moment for the creative process?
Well, it is, because that's something, if you're not present, it can really slow you down. So think about a time when you've been doing something creative or playful. Play is another really important piece of this that we can talk about too. But something, you were doing something creative and playful and you weren't aware of time. You were just in the zone and it was going along. And then you're like, oh my God, like 3 hours had passed, or even the other way around, like that was only 20 minutes. It felt like 3 hours, like just time is, you're out of it. You're in the moment. And so what you were doing when you were in that flow is you were allowing that creative energy, that spiritual energy to flow through you. It's kind of almost like channeling. So we talk about channeling and channeled writing. Really, most writing is channeled writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do the sort of the formal, okay, I'm going to meditate and light my incense and I'm going to ask my inner self to channel, okay, what is the answer to it? And that's channel. And we think of that as channeling. But also, most of the people I know who write creative things like fiction or poetry, it's coming, you can feel it coming through you. You close your eyes, you're like, oh, I see the characters, they're doing the things, I'm just going to describe it. Like, or the poem comes in and you have these words and you just capture them. This kind of channeled, and that's that. I feel like the channeling, you have to be really present for that feeling of channeling. And when you're not in that and you're trying to write something, like think, oh, this is the one that gets me, writing copy for a business offering, right? Okay, copy has to be conversion copy, and I have to say just the right thing to make the person really want to come to this retreat or whatever. It's so much pressure. You're just like, oh, you're frozen. But what I do is I try to do in like channeling that and be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to pretend that I'm now at the retreat with my clients and I'm leading the retreat. And what are we doing? And what are we feeling? What's happening? And because I've done it before, it makes it easier because I can be like, oh yeah, I've done this. Here's what it is. And here's the place, and just channel it through. And that copy is so much better than the really like stilted, like, do you have a book inside you that you'd like to, like really formal, like nobody's going to look at that and go, yeah, okay, lady. They're going to be like more inspired by what's real. And what's real and authentic to us can be only found in the present moment. Really, like when we're present with one another and connected and in that zone, that's when we really like that's valuable. Going back to value, that's valuable, right? Like,
oh my gosh,
yeah, absolutely. You used the term like creative wellspring, and I think that just like that, like the picture I get of that is like very, very present, and then you can tap into the truth of who you are, and the creativity then flows through unrestricted. And it's when we're caught in the past or the future or something that we think is wrong with us that we're restricting and blocking that flow, and it doesn't come through in the same way.
And you can tell in other like when you observe others' creations, when you're reading a book or watching that show or looking at artwork in a gallery, you can tell the ones that are really like connected and vibrant. You're like, oh, what is that? Or, wow, that story captivated me and I felt it. That's the authentic. Whereas some of the stuff that's more formulaic, it's just like, really? We've seen this movie 4 times already. Isn't it the same thing? Like, yeah, which was made probably for, let's get the best profit that we can out of the, like it's very talking self.
The formula. We watched a movie recently and it was disappointing. Like it wasn't that good. And we were talking after, I was like, the first thing that I thought about is like they had this amazing premise, and then they had an opportunity to make a really bold statement and they didn't. And just kind of like went like skirted around it, and it just didn't hit in the same way. And it very much felt like they weren't connected to the thing that was trying to come through them. And I think it's like you notice that.
Yeah. And in her book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote this book about creativity, Big Magic. Is that I have it on my shelf. Anyway, I think that's the name of it. But she talks about how ideas can be an entity of their own. And this idea will come and visit. So her story was she had this idea for a novel and it came and visited her and she got inspired with it. And then she didn't end up, for various reasons, writing it, and she just like let it go. And then another author friend of hers, and they connected, and the author's like, oh, I got this idea for this novel, and it was almost exactly the same plot. Like the idea had gone, like, you're not doing it, I'm going over here. So, maybe the idea visited them in this movie, and then they were like, yeah, but is that really going to sell tickets? Can we really do, like, then they rethought it and didn't go with the idea.
Yes, absolutely. That is, yes, that's,
And that's the other thing that
it's so interesting.
yeah, that's the other thing I tell writers, is to not try and jump ahead to, because often somebody will say, I have this great book idea. How do I get that published? Like, it's like, wait a minute, you haven't written any words at all.
Yeah.
Like, start with the idea and play with it, and flesh it out. And yeah, some writers who are prolific authors will definitely sell an idea to a publisher. That can happen. But when you're starting out, usually you need to explore it and play with it and write it and play and do things, and not, because a lot of times that I'll never get a publisher will just cut you, like, that cuts you off from the flow. You're like, why bother? Because it's not going to happen. And that's why we have an intention that is multifaceted. Like, I want to write this book because I had this great idea and I think it'll be really amazing, and I want to explore writing it and what it'll feel like. And yes, I may publish it. I mean, it may be a bestseller even. But like, what's the now? What's in the now about this? Yeah.
I've obviously like never written a book, but I think that it makes sense to me that if we embrace the concept of this book is asking to come through me, then we're going to assume like it knows how to get published, and it's not going to be up to me. It's the other way around. And I think it's like, I need to do this, and then I need to know how to get it published, and I need to make money, and then we tricked ourselves.
And that's where I go back to like schooling. Like, a lot of people I actually have, come to me and said, well, okay, I want to write, but should I really actually go back to school and get my degree as a creative, writer? And I'm like, oh, please don't do that. Like, not that there aren't great programs out there, but that puts you in a box. It puts you, like, you're externalizing it. I'm like, just, if you want to go back to school for writing because you're really super excited about that, great. But if you're just doing it because you think it's going to give you some kind of validity, just don't put that on yourself.
Okay, so you tell me I don't have to go back to school. Thank gosh.
You do not.
I love it. I think that's great. We have like this running joke in my family. There's a cousin of mine who's literally been in school her entire life. Like, she went through obviously grade school, then middle school, then high school, then college, then her master's, then her doctorate, then her PhD. Now she got whatever that's next. Now she's becoming a lawyer. Like, she's literally been in school for like over 3 decades. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Like, good for you, lady. Take that. Oh, because I got nothing.
And if it's from her joy, then great. But,
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
But if it's from the the shadow of, I'm not good enough, any of these degrees and letters by my name because I'm not good enough, then that's something to dive into. And not everybody's going to be prepared to do that. I mean, like your listeners and viewers are going to be, because they're like, ooh, deep life. I'm into, like, let me like dig into this, but not everybody will go there.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that. Yes, definitely. Okay. So I want to get into, this has been a theme, I swear, over the last week of us interviewing guests and doing podcasts. It's crazy. And when I was reviewing the few topics that you had suggested we go over, I literally like looked at Dan. I was like, okay, this can't be a coincidence. The importance of community when it comes to birthing creativity, whether it be writing or any artistic talents. Like, Nikki, I do not think you understand. I swear to God, at least the last 4,
yeah, 5? I was gonna say this is the 5th interview in a row where we've talked about the power of community.
Wow.
And building it, and like, yes, like, well, like the people that they've got in their communities, like, this person is this gardening skills, this workout skills, this, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's like, kind of like we're talking about, like, I really feel like this idea of like decentralized systems and smaller communities supporting one another is really trying to come through us.
Yes, collectively, like, we need that. Yeah. What I've discovered, so you think about the writing of a book as being a very solo, artists toiling away in their office by themselves, and that sort of thing. And you also think of sometimes writers and other artists being very introverted, which simply means that they gain energy from solitude and relaxation alone. And a lot of us are. And we also need community. And when I talk about writing community, So when we get together for our retreats, the things that people are talking about in the off, like when we're eating lunch or whatever, it's always like it's not the surface level. It's not the weather or the politics or whatever. It's like deep stuff, like my journey, or the dream I had the other night, or have you read this book and it inspired me, and oh yes, this author, that author. And so it's that need to be able to commune with like-minded folks and to have who have similar interests or similar approaches to with different interests. Like it's just that going deep. It's like your whole thing. It's like going deeper than the mainstream really allows for. And so that has been so valuable. And what happened was, so I started this business in 2018, and I was just starting to do in-person retreats. I did one in 2019. I had an in-person writing group, and then like the pandemic like shut everything down. And I was like, okay, we need to like leverage this. Like I was already using Zoom. That's when everybody got on Zoom, right? But I was already using Zoom for my clients, for my coaching, because I have people all over the place. And so I was like, all right, we're going to have a group that, and so I started, it's called the Parallel Play Dates. And so parallel play is like little toddlers when they're playing together, but they're too young to kind of like collaborate on a game, but they just like play over here and watch what the other person's doing, and they kind of like play together. So what we do is every week I have a 2-hour Zoom call, and we come together, and it's usually anywhere from like 4 people to like 20 people. It depends on the week or the month or whatever. But we come together on Zoom, and we all each say what we've brought to play with. Now, a lot of them obviously will be writers and they'll be working on their book, but there's people who have done knitting, or I'm going to try a new recipe, or you can do whatever you want, anything creative. And then I lead them through a guided meditation and a little writing prompt to kind of get us in the flow. And then we share. And often this is where, like what you're saying about community coming up everywhere, is this is where like I'll do this meditation where I just say, okay, you're in a forest and like an animal comes to you and da da da. And then like literally like 3 people will be like, wait, you had a deer? Mine was a deer too. Oh my gosh. Like it's very, collaborative energy around this stuff. So we share, and then we go, and that takes probably a half an hour. We go and play on our own things, knowing that the others are there, keeping the Zoom, we might shut the camera and the sound off, but we've got the chat there so you can touch in. So we're there like in a virtual room doing our own thing. And then at the end, we come back together and say how it went. And it might be like, oh, I was really on fire. I got all these words. Or it might be like, well, I couldn't really do anything and I took a nap. And both are fine. Like we're validating. That was your experience, the way you needed. You needed a nap today. It's okay. And so just having that community where folks are doing something creative is so validating that this is an important thing to do. It's accountability for a lot of folks, because they're like, well, at least once a week I'm going to show up for the play date and do my thing. Like that, even if the dishes are dirty, it's play date time, So, and then it's just inspiring to like people get inspiration from one another in these things, and that kind of community is built. And then of course in the in-person retreats, it's even more. People have made lifelong friendships from coming to retreats, so yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love a virtual play. That is so cool. I was just going to say, I can imagine the energy throughout that, even though it's through technology, is profound. So I can only imagine what the in-person retreats are like. Yeah, that absolutely completely makes sense. And I think that part of like community is so interesting and intriguing. And I remember writing about this, like kind of like as a manifestation, probably maybe 5 years ago around the pandemic. I was listening to guided meditations on cultivating like a tribe and like asking for it. And I thought it was just like girlfriends and like ones that I could connect on a deeper level to. But I think it really is like what you're talking about, what we're talking about here, having the resources and the people around us that are in alignment with that same frequential energy that we have, like, so that we can creatively birth out, what's really meant for us. And it can be intimidating to do that for the states or for countries. And so like where it's starting smaller to have like these little micro movements of communities and whatever it may be, I think is such a beautiful way to exercise everybody's unique gifts. Like someone's got something. And I think that the universe, if you trust it enough, because I think it knows what it's doing, is going to put the right people together to hone in on those skills and abilities and, uniqueness of the individuals.
Yeah, and I feel like we creatives sometimes get left out, or we feel left out of the culture. In like, we're not really like, we're not right wingers in the like
Yeah.
church community. We're not that. We're not left wing in the sense that we're not like, maybe we're not drawn to be in politics or activism directly. We have this inner urge to like share something, but it can be kind of lonely because it's like, oh, who you're voting for? Like, I mean, yeah, I vote and everything, but it's not like my identity like it is
Yes.
in the culture right now. It's not my identity to be like a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or, it's not. I am me. I am doing my thing. And what I've learned over the years in studying metaphysics and spirituality is really like the best thing you can do to help build a better culture is to follow your own calling, because that gets put together with all these other callings and then flourishes. So
Yes, absolutely. That completely makes sense. Oh my gosh, this has been so exciting. I feel like we could go on and on and on. But as we're wrapping up here, oh my gosh, Nikki, this has been really inspiring too. Like this has just like opened my heart even more for hopefully additional creativity to pour out. But I want to make sure that we touched upon everything that you feel is important for our listeners, audience, or anybody who's interested in cultivating more creativity through writing or any other artistic venture they'd like. Do you feel that we missed anything or that you'd like to wrap up in any certain way? Also, like, it's okay if you don't.
Well, just to finish sort of wrapping up our talk about community, I feel like now that we're able to do more in-person things, I feel like that's what's calling people forward. So also during the pandemic, I started doing virtual retreats. So quarterly, I have those. And I'm finding now that those are less popular because I think people are like, oh, I don't want to be on Zoom all weekend. I want to be like in the room with people, And so the in-person retreats are becoming more popular, and not just mine, but everywhere. So I want to encourage creatives to like come out of their comfort zone a little, maybe join a like a writing group, or go to a little event that is like related to your creativity, or start to come out, because I think that's the idea that's being called forth now, is to be in groups of people who are creative and spiritual and open and really wanting to create change from within. So yeah, just follow your heart. If you're drawn to do it online, great too, but follow your heart and see where it leads.
I love it. That's such a beautiful
perfect.
message. I think that that's wonderful. Oh, Nikki, again, thank you so much. We're going to link your website, obviously, where I've looked on there and you've got all your resources. People can connect with you there too. Anywhere else that you'd like us to direct people within the show notes?
I'm also on Instagram at Nikki Starcat Shields, so you can find me there as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you again for
Thank you.
joining us, Nikki.
Right. Thank you so much.